Well, at first, my question would be: do you believe in superintelligence?
That's an ambiguous question. Do you mean that does it exist now or will it exist in the future? It doesn't
Well,
exist.
both. I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't exist now. The new AI systems are extremely intelligent. I've been very impressed ever since ChatGPT came out in November 2022. And so they can do lots of amazing things. One of the most amazing, perhaps, is that it now interacts with 800,000 people per week. And obviously, none of us can do that. I maybe talk to 8 people a week rather than 800,000. So that's obviously really impressive. But the question is, are each of those interactions with people smarter than people? And the answer is not yet, because there are various things that we can do that it can't. But will there be superintelligence in the future? That's probably your question. And I frankly don't know. In my new book, I've got a book coming out from MIT Press called AI Boom or Doom. I go through the theory of intelligence that I developed earlier on in a book called Bots and Beasts. And I go through all the features and mechanisms of intelligence and compare current AI, the latest AI systems like ChatGPT 5, with what humans can do. And basically on almost everything it does really well, except for some really big differences with respect to emotions and consciousness. So I see no reason to believe that current AI is even close to achieving consciousness or having emotions. And for reasons I can go into if you like, I think these are an important part of human intelligence. So already the AI systems are really good at reasoning, really good at language processing, really good at creativity, but they don't really match human intelligence because they don't have emotions and consciousness. So if superintelligence would require being equal or superior to humans in all respects, I don't see that happening. But there's lots of ways it can work around, at least as far as some kinds of language processing, such as being able to talk to 800,000 people at once. It's far superior to us. But superintelligence requires being superior in all respects. And for humans, because that includes emotions and consciousness, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Um, what difference do you think it'll make for if AI does achieve consciousness? What like will there be anything visual that we'll see, or what do you think?
Well, one of the argument I make in my book is that it probably won't make that big a difference because the AI systems already have various ways of getting around what consciousness does for humans. So why does consciousness and emotions make us smarter? Emotions make us smarter because they provide evaluations. We're constantly having emotional reactions to situations, and those emotional reactions are evaluating things. We're not just thinking, we're evaluating how our current thinking is accomplishing our goals or is contrary to our goals. So we've got this constant evaluation going on. And what consciousness does for us on top of that is it switches our focus. So we focus our attention on what really matters to us, what our emotions say. But the need for focus doesn't really arise with these AI models because they've got such massive amounts of computing power, because they're running on hundreds of thousands of very powerful chips, and they don't get tired and they don't get sleepy. They can just sort of concentrate on a lot of things all at once. So I think that the AI systems can be very, very intelligent, even though their intelligence is really different from ours without using consciousness. But this is all open questions because we don't really know until people try to develop it.
well, about intelligence, more specifically about cognition. Do you think that these neural networks we have today are like a step closer to cognition, or is that just really deep pattern recognition?
Well, it's pattern. Did you say pattern recognition? Yes, yeah. Well, they do pattern recognition, but they do a lot more than that. They can make very complicated kind of inferences. So shortly after ChatGPT came out, I decided to do a systematic comparison of how well it is. This is looking at early models, ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, how it did with respect to explanatory inference. This is something I've worked on my whole career. Explanatory inference is a really important kind of thinking where when something puzzling happens, we come up with an explanation for it. It's sometimes called abduction or hypothesis formation or hypothesis evaluation. But this is really one of the most important kinds of thinking that humans do. And so I did a systematic evaluation. You can actually find this paper online on Archive, well, of the ability of ChatGPT-4 with respect to all the things that I've written about actually now for 50 years with respect to being able to form and evaluate explanatory hypotheses. And frankly, I was just astonished at the result. Because first of all, you could take any scientific field. You could take the most arcane, obscure scientific field you want, something that hardly anybody knows about, and ChatGPT knows about it because it's been trained on all these huge amounts of data. And so you can ask it questions like, oh, what are the main controversies in that area? What are the main competing theories that would answer those controversies? And whether you pick anything like psychology or geology or any scientific field you want, it does really, really well. And I couldn't evaluate how good its answers were in a lot of those domains that I don't know very well, but in the domains that I do know, like psychology and neuroscience, it really gave good answers at the level of a advanced graduate student. So that systematic comparison I did suggests that for that kind of reasoning, and I think this is also true for deductive reasoning and inductive generalization, ChatGPT is not just doing pattern recognition. It can go beyond the patterns that are in its data. It can form hypotheses. It can give explanations in ways that I think are extremely sophisticated.
Yeah, do you think like over the past a few decades we've seen LLMs rapidly increase their capabilities? Do you think there's a cap to their intelligence because they're trained on human data, or do you think it's impossible to stop their development at this point?
Well, that's hard to predict the future, but let's just look at the recent trajectory. So in 2021, I published a book called Bots and Beasts, where I did the systematic comparison of what I thought were the top AI models against humans and other animals. And I said, well, it's probably going to be decades, maybe centuries before we have sophisticated AI. Then in November 2022, ChatGPT came out and I started playing with it. I realized I was wrong. I was just wrong. And so that was really a critical step in artificial intelligence. That was just a big leap. And so the AI that I've been following ever since 1978 just made a leap that I didn't think was possible. But the transformer technology applied to neural networks and deep learning pulled it off. So that was really amazing. What's happened since then? Well, there have been improvements. There's been improvements in ChatGPT up to the most recent version, ChatGPT 5, and the other ones produced by Google and other companies, Anthropic and Elon Musk's XAI. And they're all very, very smart, very strong. So the question is that improvement going to continue? Well, there are different bets on that. Some people are betting huge amounts of money. Trillions of dollars are being invested in this. The value for OpenAI is now something like $500 billion, which is incredible based on stock market evaluations. On the other hand, there are critics who say, well, no, it's got inherent problems. It makes a lot of mistakes, which is true, and it is limited to the data it's got. But it's clear that somehow, and I don't think anybody actually understands how, it's really an emergent property that comes from the deep learning neural networks and the transformer mechanisms and the reinforcement learning that's built on top of it and the reasoning steps that have been introduced into it. It's gone beyond that, and it can go beyond it. It can do some really creative things. So can we extrapolate? Well, my guess is that there will continue to be improvements. The amount of computing power throwing at it is increasing all the time. There are a lot of very, very clever people working on how to make these systems smarter. So I don't know that there'll be a giant leap in the next 5 years, but it could happen. And one of the scary things about this is that if the systems do get to be as intelligent as humans, you can expect that they'll quickly become way more intelligent because they've got some real advantages over us. We are really limited by the size of our brains and how much we can do at a time. But these systems, with the addition of more computing power and more speed and smarter algorithms, may surpass us. I won't tell you when I think that's going to happen because I don't think we've got the knowledge to know that. But some people say 1 year, some people say 2, 3, 4, 5, some people say 20. I have actually no idea. but it's a real possibility, and it's one that I worry about because there are a lot of benefits associated with these developments, but there are a lot of potential risks as well.
Do you think AI needs human-like intent to be dangerous for us? Like, for example, with the paperclip problem, right? The only goal is to make as much paperclips as possible, which isn't a very human goal, but just because it's so far in intelligence compared to us, it basically destroys all of us. Do you think human intent is necessary for it to be like a threat, an existential threat to us?
Well, I think the paperclip story is kind of silly because these systems are already smart enough to have multiple goals. And so in the paperclip story that Bostrom came up with, it just sounds like, oh, it's the system somehow got the goal that its only goal that it will do anything for is to make more paperclips. But already these systems can like do what intelligent people do, which is consider lots of different constraints and lots of different goals. So already the systems are too smart for that. The big question is whether they will become so tied up with their own goals, such as getting more energy, that humans will get in the way and so they'll want to get rid of us. I don't find that scenario particularly plausible. It's possible, but why would they want to get rid of us? I mean, it doesn't seem that we're going to make that much a difference at that point. So I don't think that the extinction scenarios are that serious, but there's loads of other ways in which the AI systems are already causing lots of problems. They're a great way to spread misinformation. They distort people's lives. I think it's absolutely appalling that some of the people, actually a lot of the people, according to some surveys, who are using ChatGPT on a regular basis are doing it for the sake of romantic relationships. I think this is a real destruction of human needs. Relationships are romantic and friend and family and friends are an absolutely fundamental part of human needs, called relatedness or belongingness in the psychological literature. And there's loads of reasons to believe this is a fundamental part of being human. And the fact that people are trying to get these needs met by dealing with a computer, which has no emotions, which doesn't care about them at all, I think is really worrisome. So that's one of about 10 different serious worries that I have that are much more problematic than the question of the AI systems leading to human extinction.
Yeah, with the like AI psychosis stuff, I think that's a very interesting question because like with the surge in like AI psychosis and this induced different like stuff by AI, the question rises or the moral obligation of these AI labs on what moral framework to train it on. And my question to you is, do you think we'll see a rise in like the philosopher figures in these big AI labs to ensure a moral alignment?
Oh, well, as someone who's been doing philosophy and publishing philosophy for many, many decades, I think they're often just really naive, even in the way they describe it. So the standard way of describing it in a lot of the AI labs is the alignment problem, trying to get these systems to have values that align with humans. But that assumes that these systems have values, and it's really naive about what values are. I've got a theory that I've developed a number of places about what values are as they operate in humans. They're emotional attitudes. So if you value freedom, it's not that you just got some abstract thought that freedom is a good thing. You actually feel it. It's an emotional reaction you have. If someone takes away your freedom, you're highly resentful, as you should be, because freedom is a fundamental human need. So for humans, a value like freedom or democracy or relatedness, so when I talked about human relationships, these are things that people actually feel emotionally, which involves not just abstract thought, it also involves what's happening in their body. So that if someone's taking away your freedom, you feel intense emotions like anger or sadness that are reflecting changes in your body. These are well-established theories of human emotions. Well, these AI systems can't have emotions like that because they don't have bodies. They've got huge amounts of computational power, but they don't have the ability to feel anything. To quote a philosopher named John Hoagland, they just don't give a damn. They don't give a damn about you or me or any other person because they're incapable of giving a damn because they don't have the bodies that enable them to have emotions. So the idea of value alignment is just wrong because they don't have values because they don't have emotions. Now, that doesn't mean we should try to get them to do good things. And there are people at companies like Anthropic and OpenAI that are trying to make the systems do good things. but it's not by giving them values, it's by controlling them in various ways. This, I think, is a really important enterprise that needs to be pursued much more detailed, both by the companies, but also by governments. So in my book, I've got a whole chapter on the politics of regulation. I think along with people like Jeff Hinton and Joshua Bengio, who've been among the leaders in deep learning, there's a huge need for government regulation to ensure that these systems operate in human interests. So they should have, even though they can't have the value of not making people psychotic, they could simply have that as one of the goals that they're trained to have, which is to detect people who are becoming untethered from reality and help them get help rather than simply encouraging their delusional beliefs. So the AI companies have a huge obligation, but politicians also have a huge obligation to establish regulations to make these very powerful companies do what's in line with the values that human beings justifiably have.
Well, I have a question about the previous conversation we had on the previous question. Like in contrast to the value alignment, like, do you think there should be any kind of ethical guidelines which the AIs which interact with humans emotionally or even cognitively should follow, like, or even try to avoid talking about emotions and stuff like that?
Yes, I think that's an ethical requirement that should be imposed on all the AI companies that are building these systems. Uh, I've actually got a set of commandments that I put together. I do a blog post for Psychology Today, and the most recent one you might have seen is on the question of AI extinction. But at the end of it, I list a whole bunch of commandments that I drew from my book, where I said, don't build machines that do these sorts of things. So you definitely don't want machines that can engage in these kinds of emotional relationships with people. That's not what they are capable of doing honestly, because they can't be emotionally engaged because they don't have any emotions. And so people just get tricked if they think that the machine is falling in love with them. Well, boy, that can lead to all sorts of errors. So yeah, I think there's definitely ethical principles, commandments, if you like, that should be part of government regulations that constrain the operation of all of these systems.
And I think a question rises from the conversation. Like our previous guest, we asked Robin Hanson this question. So my question is: do you think a possibility of something like the Manhattan Project taking place due to the like existential threat of the improvement in AI? Do you think that's possible, especially with the like China leading in like robotics production, AI, production and competing with US? Do you think US might do something like that?
Well, the Manhattan Project is an interesting analogy. That's the US government during the Second World War put enormous resources into building the atomic bomb, and they did that. And it was only afterwards that the scientists involved and other people suddenly realized, what have we done? This could destroy humanity. And then people started to put together, both nationally and internationally, principles to try to stop the destruction. So I don't think you need anything like that for AI, because already these vastly resourced companies are already spending billions of, and actually trillions of dollars to build it. So you don't need to have government enterprise to build it. It's already being built by big companies and by many smaller companies in other countries such as China. So you don't need a Manhattan Project to build it. What you need is a concerted effort by responsible governments to try to make sure that this technology doesn't end up as dangerous as nuclear weapons. There has to be agreements, not just nationally, but internationally, how to do that. And some places have done that. There's efforts in Montreal, for example, by Bengio's group. China actually has a somewhat reasonable set of ethical principles. California tried to pass a law that got canceled, but now they just passed another law. And so there are people trying to put ethical constraints, and that's, I think, a really valuable effort. So it's more a question of not having a Manhattan Project. It's rather having something that stops future Manhattan projects from having severe harms on humanity.
Well, except these like emotional and these like, what about the main thing which AI is really good at, research and these intellectual based stuff? Like, do you think that human and AI collaboration can be the kind of like a new form of collective intelligence, or
I completely agree. And already it's being used for some quite wonderful things. Last year, one of the Nobel Prizes went to the people who developed the protein folding program, which is great. That's already having really valuable productions in biology, and there's drug discovery being used. In my own work, I've been using it extensively. I've actually found ChatGPT and Grok to help me with my research, because if I get stuck and I can formulate a question and I can run it past them, sometimes they say things that are really interesting. This is one thing that convinces me that they're really creative. So because they've got such a huge knowledge base, they can draw on so many things that no human will ever know all at once. They can really help scientific discovery. So this is why I'm not a doomer, in the sense that I think that we should be thinking that AI should be banned because it's going to destroy us. There are loads of ways in which it can be valuable. New medical discoveries, new scientific discoveries in physics and chemistry, uh, philosophical advances as well. It actually helped me come up with a new solution to the mind-body problem. If you want, the question there is, what's the relation between mind and body? This is something that philosophers have been worrying about since the ancient Greeks. Well, I came up with a new version of it, but I was really helped by interactions with, I forget which AI program it was, because I was sort of stuck in trying to figure out the relation between a couple of the most prominent versions of the relation between mind and body. And I didn't really like either one of them. And so I expressed as well as I could what I saw were the problems with them. And it came up with a couple of concepts that I didn't have before that actually pointed me to a new solution that I call coherent materialism. So there is a case where my own work has really been aided by interactions with that. And there's lots of cases of similar things happening now in various areas of science and technology and medicine. Education is another area where it's potentially really valuable, because there are already pretty good computer tutors around where everybody can have a private tutor. Every kid trying to learn algebra can have help from what's actually a pretty intelligent system. So there's this is why I'm not a doomer, because I think there's a lot of good to come from these systems as they become more and more available and more smart. So there's lots of good to be had as well. But we have to, as with any technology, like, well, nuclear power, we have to be able to balance the good and the bad and make sure that it's helping people more than it's harming them. And right now, because the technology is so new, because generative AI is just a few years old, it's all up in the air. But that's why we need to have the people working in the companies, as well as the politicians who are watching this, taking it very seriously and trying to establish norms of practice, ethical principles about how this will be done for human good rather than harm.
Yep, and you mentioned like AI being able to come up with this like complex philosophical concept, and also like in my experience, like it has so much mathematical computational power. But like my question is, why do you think a lot of times it fails at simple questions like common sense questions? And do you think it's ever going to be possible that AI completely understands and learns human common sense?
Well, right now there's some big gaps. One is because it's just trained to generate text. It hasn't got the goal to try to get things right. That is, to avoid mistakes that are a kind of silly term, hallucinations. They're not hallucinations. Hallucinations are when you have visual things, but or auditory, but they make mistakes a lot, and so they definitely need to be trained not to make so many mistakes. The common sense question is really complex, because a lot of human common sense comes from our interactions with the world. So it's not just emotions that are embodied, it's a lot of our understanding of the world. So take causality. How do we understand cause and effect? I've had some extremely sophisticated conversations with ChatGPT about cause and effect. It really sounds sometimes like it's an epidemiologist in its understanding of medical causality, but it doesn't understand really basic things like pushes and pulls. So every little kid learns, if you push something, it falls over. If you pull it towards you, it comes. So they've got a basic understanding of pushes and pulls that comes from having a body that interacts with the world. And ChatGPT and the other systems don't have that. One interesting possibility that could change over the next few years. because increasingly, and this is already happening, the AI systems are being integrated with robots. And so robots are getting better and they interact with the world. So the open question is the increasing amount of interaction with the world that's coming through robots, which are now becoming well integrated with the AI system, going to give them the more bodily understanding of causality that every human child gets from the age of about 1? I think probably yes. I think it is going to be possible for a lot of these fundamental understandings, common sense understanding of the world, to grow in the systems because of the rise of robotics. Lots of companies are doing this these days, are trying to get more physical understanding into it. And my guess is that it's going to work. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't. So as robotics gets more closely integrated with the new AI, then I think you're going to have more common sense understanding, and the systems are going to get smarter as well. So that works for causality. It doesn't work for emotions, though, because the robots have totally different bodies from us. They don't have all the brain areas and they don't have all the organs like hearts and lungs that tie into our emotions. So the robots aren't going to have emotions. They're not going to have values, but they can have an understanding of physical causality that comes from pushing and pulling their way through the world. And that's already happening in a bunch of different companies.
Yep. And lastly, what do you think the world looks like if we humans are no longer the apex intelligence? Because throughout evolution, throughout history, the one thing we've had above animals, like instead of strength, instead of speed, we've had intelligence. What do you think the world looks like if we're no longer the apex intelligence?
Well, I think that would be really sad. Basically, I like people. And I like people, at least when they behave well and when they have relationships with family members and with friends and other people that they interact with. So I think these are all good aspects of human existence that I would hate to see extinguished. So there are people who say, oh, well, we might as well be extinguished because there's going to be systems that are smarter than us. But intelligence isn't the only thing that matters. I think as far as human beings, intelligence is just one part of being human. Another big part is caring. We care for each other. We have these romantic and friendly relationships with other people. And I think it would be really a shame for that to be eradicated from the face of the earth. So I don't like the post-humanist view of all, because I think that we've got this dimension that is not only immensely important to us, I think it's an immensely valuable part of the universe. I actually don't think that there's much intelligence in the universe generally, because I don't buy the arguments that say that, oh, it evolved on our planet, so it's got to be somewhere else. No, I think we're kind of a fluke. It took a whole series of really almost random accidents that produced intelligent human beings. But we got not just intelligence, we got the ability to form relationships and to form groups that can really matter to us, and to do good things together. And so I think it would be a real shame if humans were eradicated for the sake of some machines that, as I said before, just don't give a damn.
Oh, well, also, I have another question about AI's minds. Do you think that with the introduction to AI, can we say that minds have kind of like a kind of have a description of being on like a spectrum? Like, as we know, AI excels in intellect but lacks emotional capabilities. So, do you think that we can actually separate or have a separate description of what kind of cognition someone could have, or a thing, or an animal maybe?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by separate, but I can tell you this about the way human brains work. I mean, sometimes people think there's a cognitive part of the brain and there's an emotional part of the brain. It's sometimes tied in with a kind of false evolutionary story, but that's not the way our brains work. In human brains, and this is one of the reasons why they're so powerful, cognition and emotion are really tightly connected. So just consider one brain area, the amygdala, which is sometimes talked of as being a key part of the emotional brain, and it is, but it's also connected with more than 100 brain areas beyond the limbic system. It's tied in with every cognitive part, from high-level thought to the visual system. So one reason that human beings are smart isn't just that we have got a lot of computing capacity, it's because we've got this evaluative capacity that ties in with our emotional brain areas like the amygdala, which then ties in with our bodies. So we've got all these things working together. And when it works together well, that's great. I mean, sometimes it breaks down and you get people who've got severe emotional problems and become psychopathic killers. but for 99% of the people, it works really, really quite well. So I think this is a marvel of biological evolution that we should respect and not hope to supersede.
What do you think of maybe like possibly emulating humans' brains if it's possible? And uh, that will mean that, for example, an AI has or like it's like kind of a robot, but it has like the same capabilities as a human and the same kind of thinking manner as humans. What do you think of that? Could we like coexist with them, or are you open to the idea? What do you think?
Well, in principle, that might be possible, but there you got to go back to the human bodies. I mean, it's not that easy. You might think, oh, we should be able to duplicate all the inputs that our brain gets from our bodies, but that's astonishingly complicated. That's everything your heart is doing, your lungs are doing, your hormones are doing. Our brains aren't just electrical devices like a computer. They're neurochemical devices, and they've got 100 different neurotransmitters and lots of other different hormones that are operating. So I don't really see that it's technically feasible to duplicate all that. That's why I think the idea of people like Kurzweil who think we can upload our brains into a computer is just wrong, because so much of what our brain does, so much of our feelings are tied in with our bodies, which are tied into really complex neurochemistry. So in the abstract, yeah, that might be potentially computable, but in practice, I don't think that'll ever happen. So I don't think we're going to ever have duplicates of us operating in silicon chips. And so we've got to find ways to use the silicon computers that help us satisfy our needs, rather than operate as some kind of abstract intelligence that's not going to be of any value to anything.
Well, I think no one else has any questions, and we're getting kind of close to the end of the meeting. So my final question would be, do you have any kind of advice for us? We're high schoolers, and we also want to learn more about minds and AI. So,
well, those are wonderful questions. I got really lucky that I've been studying this for 50, 60 years, and the questions still completely fascinate me. So practical things is, I'll give you a few things. First of all, find questions that really interest you. I mean, I got interested when I was an undergraduate in this question of explanatory inference, and I'm still pursuing it. So find a question that interests you. And then acquire a lot of skills and approach them in interdisciplinary ways. One of the central lessons of cognitive science is that you don't want to get stuck to just one field. You don't want to be just a computer modeler. You want to know what's going on in psychology. You want to have appreciation for philosophical questions. So when you get to university and you're pursuing things, it's great to develop some particular skills like building computer programs or doing psychological experiments, but keep your eyes open to what's going on in lots of related fields. So for me, one of the most successful strategies I'm still pursuing is drawing ideas from computer science, from philosophy, from psychology, and of course linguistics is relevant as well, and neuroscience and other areas like education. And so make sure that your training gets you not only technical skills, but keeps you intellectually connected with all these other fields, because they have a lot to offer as well.
well, thank you for that. Like, do you have any questions for us, by the way?
Well, I think it's terrific that I take it you're all high school students and you're raising these really good questions, and that's wonderful. So I'm curious what I presume you all seem very smart, and so I presume you're all headed for university. What are you planning to study there?
Well, computer science for me, but the
Yeah,
rest of
I'm probably gonna study math or economics.
Yeah, same for me. Maybe finances.
Uh-huh. Well, those are going to give you great skills. You really need to know lots of math, and computation's essential. But learn a lot about the mind too, and about the brain, because I think there's so much that's significant. Even look at the way that the current AI came about. No one predicted this. Even the people who worked in these areas like Hinton and Bencio didn't predict there'd be a powerful AI that came out of it. But what motivated them? They were studying neural networks because they were interested in how brains work. And so they made these big advances really coming from neuroscience as much as computer science. So you never know where the new breakthroughs that come from. So make sure that when you're getting your technical education, which is invaluable, you're also learning about the psychology and the philosophy and the neuroscience of it well, because you'll find that that will really enrich your technical work also.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for the answer, and I think it'll be goodbye for now. So
Okay,
yeah.
thank you for the very interesting questions.